Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Life After Kids with Doctors Brooke and Lynne. I'm Dr. Brooke.
And I'm Dr. Lynne.
And we're so glad you're here. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, welcome, everybody. We're having a real Soul Sisters conversation today. We're talking all about boundaries at this stage in our life.
Yeah, and I think I know this is an important topic. And this is Valentine's Week.
Yes.
Last year at this time, we did a episode on self-care and self-love. And I want to talk about boundaries. We want to talk about boundaries because having boundaries for yourself is a form of self-love and self-care.
It truly is. It's one of the highest forms of that. And, if you've been a people pleaser in your life, if you've been somebody who's felt like maybe disrespected at times, I feel like this stage in our life, we're coming into our own and we're finally getting to a place where we have the courage and we just can't accept the alternative anymore. We have to set these boundaries. But I do know this is a question for many of us. How do we go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a tricky thing. And I think the problem is like setting a boundary that's healthy and good for yourself and safe for you can come across to other people, or we can think in our mind it's going to come across as, let's face it, like bitchy, right?
Yeah.
Like, who does she think she is? Like
that, and just inside of our families, we've come off of most of our adult life taking care of our partners and our kids, and it can feel selfish, right? And they may look at it as being selfish because it's a change, it's a transition. Mom's going through a phase where she's doing things a little differently, and it causes them to question.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
That's the pushback you can get.
Absolutely, and definitely with your kids, especially if your whole world has been your kids and you just loved on them and put them first in everything, which, by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. But as they're growing up and we're growing up, it's time to spend some time on yourself, and it's okay to do that.
Yeah, and not just with girls, but especially with girls, with boys too. I think it's so important, and this can be your why on why you would push through that. And it's so worth it to do this work, to set these boundaries, is because we now need to be an example for these kids.
So important.
To show them how a better way, I guess, and show them how to do that for themselves as well.
Yeah, and you know what? And the flip side of that, because I'm a mom of all boys, is I think when you're setting those boundaries and drawing clear lines for yourself, you're teaching them how to be with their spouse.
So true. And to respect women and how to walk that line with women and respect that line.
Absolutely.
Okay, so talk about boundaries and how to go about setting them. I mean, it's not an exact science, right?
Yeah.
Let's just face that. Facts there. But what's a step? What's a way that a woman who's listening to that goes, oh man, I know I get walked all over, or I know I felt disrespected just recently. How do you start? Where do you go?
This is a tough thing, because it could be a friend, it could be a family member. I mean, those are the biggest things. If it's
coworkers.
What's that?
Coworkers.
I mean, there are so many different ways, but typically, if you need to set a boundary, it's with somebody that means something to you or is an important part of your life, where the boundaries need to be set. And so because of that, you need to do a little bit of like finesse or ice skating around it. So I think that there are two ways to look at it. You can let yourself get to the point where you finally just cut that person out. And by the way, sometimes that's necessary. But before you go there, I believe the best way to go about that is to communicate in a kind and loving way, and speak how you're feeling, or, if you're going to have a conversation with somebody around setting a boundary in place, the conversation needs to be around, it's nothing against you. Like, I'm not upset with you. I'm protecting myself. I'm doing this for me. I'm not angry. I'm not mad. This is how I'm feeling. In order to keep myself safe and well and protective, I just need to back off, or I need whatever it is that you're going to ask. Yeah. I think that's the way you need to start.
I think a really practical tip on that is to do some journaling or some answering some questions. Just do some work, whether it's in your morning, to just jot those things down too. For somebody who I keep a lot up here in my head, it's so helpful before you go into ththose conversations, if you're going to tackle that, because you're right, communication is key.
Yeah.
But jot down the points that you want to make and jot down the result. So yeah, sometimes it is, and we hear a lot about that, cut people out. But gosh, there's something to be said about working through something in a relationship with a person. So again, step back. Is this person on a whole a good person and has been good for you? And look at the whole length of the relationship, not just how they're acting right now, because maybe they're going through something too. But before you go into those conversations, make sure you take some time to just go through some self-awareness and journal, and write those things down so you can go in and communicate clearly.
Yeah, especially if you don't have communication as a high talent or strength. You may need to take the time to do that so you know exactly what it is that you want to say. I'll even back up. We're sort of reverse engineering this because I started with cut them out of your life and we're backing up from there, which I don't recommend. Don't get me wrong there. But in some instances, you might get to that point.
Chronic, repetitive
toxicity.
Examples. Exactly.
Right. At some point, you might just have to do that. But I'll take it even a step before. For me, I'll never forget this. This was probably 6 years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, that I didn't even ever think about setting boundaries or what a boundary was. And I had this conversation with, of all people, my pastor. And he was like, Brooke, we were talking through something that was bothering me. And he was like, sometimes you have to set boundaries with people. And I was like, what is this you speak of? And he recommended a book called Boundaries by
excellent
Henry Townsend, and is it Cloud? I can get you guys it. I've posted it before, but I think the point is, the first step is recognizing that you might need a boundary and being okay with knowing that's okay. It doesn't make you a bad person.
Yes.
That was the conversation that I had with my pastor. He's like, it doesn't, you don't have to be the person for everybody, to do everything for them and just continue to be walked on and to make sure that they're happy. That's not, you're still a good person if you take a step back or you protect yourself. It's okay to do that. That might be the first step for you.
There's something so pivotal there, because I do think as women, we get that messaging that we are to be there for people and to give to others, and that is a good thing, but it cannot hurt us. If it's hurting us, then we've gone outside of that boundary, and that's where you said we're gonna just bottle that up, and it's gonna come out in other ways. It's gonna manifest, and you're gonna take it out on someone else. You're going to eat your feelings. You're going to numb your feelings. Those are all the ways that those things can hurt you even more, unfortunately.
Right, which is not a good place to be.
Yeah.
And if you don't get to that place and you're just smoldering on it, you're like, that's not okay. You're going to be miserable. And listen, that's not only affecting you emotionally, even if you don't feel it. If it's not affecting you right now physically, it's going to show up as symptoms down the road.
Yeah.
So you need to work that out. Do you have anything specific? Is there anything you can specifically talk about? You don't have to share the whole thing, but anything that you can...
Well, I think this is such a good conversation, and we could take it to, I think this could be a whole separate vlog about over-functioning women and under-functioning women, and those women that will just rush in and make everything okay and people please. And that's where some of my boundaries have been violated, I guess. That's a strong word, but in recognizing that I set myself up for that. So it's not always other people. It's not the other person.
You do it to yourself.
Yes. So it's again, it starts with self-awareness. It really starts with knowing who you are, how you function, and we sometimes rush, or we a lot of times rush to what we're doing to try to change that. But instead, what we do is based on who we are. And so we need to start there. And so I know I'm an overfunctioner. I know that I do that. I have learned to really get clear on my role, my job, what I'm willing to do, what I'm not willing to do. It goes back to our core values. And just stay in check as much as I can with what I want out of my week, out of my family, out of my interactions. And again, it's not an exact science.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you feel that, then going to that place where you have the conversation, and because that will help often clear that air, and at least you speak up for yourself, which helps you to feel like you get a little bit of that boundary back.
Yeah, that's such a smart thing for you, how self-aware enough to be I started the problem because I overextended myself.
Yeah.
If you're the person that's offering to do it all, or if the other people in your life know they can ask you because it's always going to be a yes, that's a you issue.
Yeah.
That you need to maybe back up. I think a lot of us think that we can get all the things done, we can do all the things, we can be all the things, the day's going to be long enough, and then when we get in the situation, we're like, why are they overextending me? Well, you said yes, so you've said it in the past. You need to break that cycle.
Yes. Yeah, when you say yes to something, that's something that I've learned as in those boundaries. When you say yes to something, that means you have to say no to something at the same time, because our time is limited, and it really truly is. That's the one thing we can't expand upon, unfortunately.
And this is the thing, this is so good, because when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Now, here I think lies the beauty of boundaries, because if you don't have a clear boundary when you know when to say no, you could be, because you didn't set that boundary, you didn't say no, now you could be taken away from something with your family. Yeah. You could be taken away from something important you needed to do in the day. Good. But more importantly, and what often usually happens, is you're saying no to yourself. Mm-hmm. You're saying yes to somebody else or something else, and you're saying no to yourself. And that's the issue. That's the issue, and then resentment will build up. Right. Yeah, which is it's a cycle that you can break with communication and self-awareness, and just learning to step back before you commit to something. Yeah. And by the way, there's a fine line there too, because if it's always like, sorry, no, because of me, that can quickly become selfish too. So this everything in moderation. Life is a balancing act, but do you know what I'm saying? Like, do you have to? I totally do. And again, that's where it's like, this is a tricky conversation, because you really do need to walk in the middle of that, because putting yourself out there, being a leader, those are all good things. But I guess the sign is, if you're finding yourself feeling resentful, if you're finding yourself feeling tired, exhausted, mad at yourself, mad at other people, then you possibly have a boundary issue emotionally that you could just explore and examine. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Guys, thank you so much for joining this conversation with us. We always appreciate you watching and tuning in. Hope you're following us on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Our website is www.lifeafterkids.com. Guys, thanks for joining us. Have a great week, and make it count.